CyberStationUSA.com's On the Street. I'm Wayne Toronto, joined alongside my co-host Ted Bailey. And as I promised, we have our first guest coming on today, and this woman is compelling. She's a political activist and author, well-respected author, and a person who's very concerned about how America has changed. And she's of Ted and our generation, but I think the views that you hear from Jill Cody is something that everyone should absorb. If you're a citizen, you should listen to the words from our next guest. It's my pleasure to welcome Ms. Jill Cody to On the Street.
Thank you, Wayne. It's my pleasure to talk to both of you and to your listeners.
You know, Jill, this
Thanks,
is the
Jill.
election year. It's just a few days from right now. And, of course, we're live here on Saturday. If you want to participate, email us at onthestreet@live.com or give us a call in on the number that you see on the Facebook. But, you know, you are saying that there are two kinds of Americans, those that vote and those that don't. What's your concern about this coming up election, Jill?
Well, there's those that do and those that don't, but I think there's really four types that do vote and one that doesn't. And the four types that I've determined are courageous voters, concerned voters, casual voters, and caustic voters. And then the ones that don't, I call the cynical citizen.
Cynical citizen? What is that?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I really, Dr. Covey said that cynicism is a wound of the heart, and I think there are many people in this country, actually 4 out of 11, who feel it's not worthwhile to vote. They don't think their vote counts. It doesn't make a difference. Everybody's a crook. And so they just literally throw their birthright away. They're willing to surrender their birthright.
Well, thinking
Jill,
about it.
I've always voted. I'm sorry, Ted. I've always voted, always. And I told you this when I talked to you before. I've never, ever in my whole life, and I've been around a while, neglected being a participant, checking out the different issues and the different contestants for positions and what they're standing for, and if it's in sync with what I would like to see happen. But there was a change, and in Jill's writing, you can notice this. In 1971, with a man who I've looked up since reading about you, he sort of changed things. Lewis Powell, and with the Polymer Memorandum, and not many people know what that's about. Can you elaborate a little bit, Jill?
Certainly. Lewis Powell was a corporate attorney, and he wrote a memorandum, and it's ultimately been called a manifesto because of its impact. And he wrote this memo to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And in doing so, he said that if they didn't get involved in politics, meaning corporations and businesses, if they didn't get involved in politics, that they were destroying their own future survival. And it really struck panic in the heart of corporate CEOs. And they then started to do what they needed to do for their future survival, which is get rid of things that get in their way with profit. So it was advantageous to start demonizing regulations. And what are regulations? They're just rules. They're rules for that particular industry or area. We wouldn't play ball or football or soccer without rules, but regulations get in the way of corporate profit. So it was the kickoff to start looking at how they can tear those things down that would get in their way.
Well, look at the tobacco industry. Yeah, but say for instance, the tobacco industry that has molded the congressmen to their own will and to vote in their way. The National Rifle Association is a huge lobbyist. The lobbyists in general, I mean, does it look like that they're bending things maybe in an unnatural way?
Well, they have lobbyists have increased tremendously since 1971, and that's how they bend the will of the politicians and are constantly at their door. You and I can't be in Washington every day standing at the door. We don't have our own lobbyists, but the corporations can hire people, and it's become a huge, as you know, it's become a huge business. K Street to be able to talk to the people that we've elected. And what's happened is that we have, the Princeton and Northwestern University study that was completed in September of 2014. They analyzed 1,771 pieces of legislation. And this was before the Citizens United and McCutcheon versus the FEC decisions. And they determined, after studying nearly 2,000 pieces of legislation, that, quote, the average American has only a minuscule, near zero, statistically non-significant impact on public policy. So what the corporations have understood is that policy is everything, and whoever has control of the people that make the legislation are the ones that get the advantages.
Well, and no one's understood that more than Joseph Kennedy way back when he was doing his alcohol business and way back in the Prohibition days. And he realized one thing. He said, if I could get my kids into politics and get them running the country, he says, I can have everything my way. I mean, that's all the way back in the mafia days of that sort of thing. So we've seen that all the way back then. But let's take it on the consumer level, just the regular you and I and the regular person wandering around on the street. I think you had it right when you said maybe that they feel like that their vote means nothing, that it's already been predetermined. Is that the case, or is it the fact that people have apathy? And I mean, almost we have it so easy, Jill, that as we drive around in the streets, we're happy with going and shopping at the mall, going and shopping at the grocery store, and we think, oh, it's not going to change. It's never going to change. You know, it'll all work out. It'll all become okay. Is that the way it's going to be forever? I mean, are we doomed for the status quo? I say doomed because it seems to be like a never-ending happiness. Is it ever going to end?
Well, I hope it's not forever. I mean, my passion, my fight, why I'm talking to you and your listeners, is to try to inspire people to take our democracy back, to recapture our democracy. We technically don't have a democracy anymore. Even President Carter, back in September 2015 said, we've become an oligarchy instead of a democracy, and that it was the worst damage to the moral and ethical standards of American political system that he'd ever seen in his life. So we've lost our democracy, and I want people to get that feeling of when something's been stolen, when we walk into our home and we realize, there's somebody's broken in and they've taken our TV and our computer, and we feel violated, and we want that thief caught and put in jail, and we'll fight to get it back. And that's what I want people to feel for our democracy, because we have been carefully taught and trained through advertising, and which also uses brain science now to want us to buy things and to manipulate us. We've been told to shop and consume. We haven't been taught to vote and understand the power of policy. And yet the billionaires understand the power of policy because, David and Charles Koch and Sheldon Adelson and Pete Peterson and Art Pope, some of these billionaires want to take over the federal government and their state governments because they want to get their hands on the ability to make policy. And I saw one slide that was extremely powerful to explain policy, and that was a photograph taken from an airplane of the demarcation line of the island that two countries are on, Haiti and the Dominican Republic, that just suffered quite a bit with Hurricane Matthew. And the demarcation line between the two countries, one was just stripped of all its forest, and the other had a full, healthy, vibrant forest. And there was the line, stripped and healthy. And that's policy. One country had the policy to not lumber their forest too much, and the other didn't care. So even the pothole in your street is policy because someone made the decision to use the money someplace else. So we just need to start thinking about our role as a citizen, what citizenship that we play. And that's why I talk about courageous voters and concerned voters, because they're the ones that are going to help us recapture our democracy.
Well, when you say recapture
Jill, I just got an
democracy,
email from someone named Stan. I'm sorry, Ted. I just got an email from Stan who states, listen, I understand what you're saying, the loss of democracy, but what can we do as citizens? And this person states that they've gone to protest, but as you and I have spoken before, a lot, even that's restricted. You're no longer allowed to go very close to various events and protest where these events are happening because we put on restrictions there. So in answering this, Stan, what do you recommend, Jill?
Well, to be honest, we really only have three things left, I believe, in my view: shaming, shunning, and voting. And I think Colin Kaepernick, no matter what you think of his protest, here's a semi-celebrity making $1 million plus contract, and all he has in his ability is to shame. And so that's what he was doing with his protest of going on his knee to bring attention to what's happening in the country. But most of us don't even have that platform other than shaming through letter writing and email writing and phone calls to companies that aren't behaving properly. But, so if we can't shame and shun too actively, the only thing we have left is voting. So if we're a caustic voter and we're voting and using our vote like a weapon because we're trying to get back at somebody, but get back to whom and for what, but we're not thinking clearly, we're not being constructive. If we're a cynical citizen, as I said, 4 out of 11 don't vote. If we're a casual voter, meaning, well, I'll vote in the presidential elections, but not the midterm. Or if I vote in the presidential, I won't study all the ballot measures. I'm worried about that with California because we have 17 ballot measures this year. But I don't want to study all that, so I'll vote for the presidential election, but not all the down ballots. So you really are leaving voting in the hands of the courageous and concerned voters because the casual, caustic, and cynical can't be depended on. So I want to be able to move people if they can really look in the mirror and realize that there has been a plan to want you to not vote. There are people, as Paul Weyrich wanted back in 1980 with that. You can see it on YouTube. It's called the Goo syndrome. He doesn't want people that want good government. He doesn't want everybody to vote. And as long as a lot of people don't vote, the people in power, they get their way. So they want to put roadblocks up. They want to make it miserable in any way they can. So we have huge voter suppression issues going on. And so that's why people get frustrated, because they are the only way those in entrenched power, and I would like to call them living in the red power structure, and I'll explain that in a minute if you like, but is for people to willingly throw their birthright away. And 4 out of 11 just willingly do that. We're gifted that at birth, and we just throw it away.
You know, Jill, again, I've spoken to you off the air, and I've told you of certain changes that I would like to see, including term limits. Now, I believe that there should be term limits, only because I think that encourages various differences of viewpoints and what a new politician can do to convey a change. And I also think that that there shouldn't be a party system. Again, I made a statement before that Washington stated that we shouldn't have various party systems, because then that curbs people from, instead of voicing an opinion in respect to a political candidate's viewpoints, you're going on one party or the other. Now, I personally, Jill, and I've told you this off air, I've always voted independent. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I have voted on various parties depending on the issues and the candidates and what they profess they want to institute as a change. Do you think that we actually need a fundamental change in the way our government runs?
Well, respectfully, Wayne, I see things a little bit differently in that, let's take term limits first. personally, I've worked in government long enough where the term limit issues come up, and has been enacted in California at several levels. And what I have observed is that we already have term limits, and that's called voting. That's called elections. Because what I've observed is when you have term limits, you're putting the real power into the hands of the bureaucrats, the ones that you don't elect, the faces that you don't see, the ones that will be there when a city council person comes or goes. And I even heard a planning director once say, when a city council person was having a discussion, an issue that he didn't agree with, is that, what do I care? I'll outlast him. So I don't want to put the power in the hands of faceless bureaucrats. Having been one, but I think a very responsible and constructive one, I have observed the other side of that. To me, elections are term limits, and voting, and you have a face, and you have a track record, and you have somebody that you can vote into office or out of office or even impeach if we don't like it. So that's my view on term limits. Take it for, as you like. And then regarding the party system, again, I take another viewpoint, a little bit of a different viewpoint, in that our party system is obviously very entrenched, and it is our reality. And if we tear it down, I'm concerned that what comes back isn't what we expected, because who will have the power to rebuild it other than those people that have the money and have the wherewithal to rebuild it? I won't have the wherewithal to fund a variety of different organizations or entities to rebuild this system, but corporations and billionaires will, so I think they will be building it into their likeness, into what they want, which would be more entrenched oligarchy and corporatism, or libertarianism, if you will. I feel the way, because the party system that we have now, as problematic as it is, because it's been most of them have been, captured by the corporations and billionaires at this point after this 40-year, what I call Velvet Coup, is we start working within them. People we have to start running for office ourselves. We have to start capturing and changing from within, just like the Tea Party did within the Republican Party. They took the existing system and recaptured it and turned it into their likeness. So
Jill, you brought up a really good point right there. You were mentioning your term, the Velvet Coup, which I want you to explain just a minute. But you wrote a book, I guess at least it's almost a book or about to be a book, called America Abandoned, The Secret Velvet Coup. It's a great book now that you can get, Amazon.com, right?
Yes, that's right, on Amazon and through my website, AmericaAbandoned.com. But yes, I've written this book, and I called it The Velvet Coup because years ago, I facilitated a meeting in the Czech Republic, and I learned about their history. And they broke away from the Soviet Union without firing a shot, and they called it their Velvet Revolution. So I started thinking I wanted to know what happened to this country. And as Wayne and I talked earlier, we have a lifespan that's sort of before the 1980s and after the 1980s, and have been able to see the shift in this country from a democracy to really this corporatocracy and oligarchy. And I wanted to know what happened, just to answer my own question. And so when I started researching this, and it took me 3 years, I realized that we've had a velvet coup. We've had a coup by billionaires and corporations without anyone firing a shot. It's like the frog in the pot of water. You put that frog in a cold pot of water and turn the heat up slowly. The frog will never jump out, and we eventually have frog leg soup. But if you put the frog in the boiling hot water, it's going to jump right out. But we've been the frog in the cool pot, and the temperature's been rising for the last 4 decades. And now we find ourselves, and I think a lot of people, the caustic voters, are finding themselves, they know there's something wrong. They know they don't like it. They know they've lost. something. They've been abandoned, but they don't know what it is. And that's what I try to explain in my book. I actually have 22 seminal moments in people, individuals, starting, with Lewis Powell. So that's what I call the Velvet Coup, is that's what we've experienced. And I wanted people to understand what happened so that they get angry enough in a constructive way, which I call living in the black. Living in the red, living in the black. It's just a checkbook analogy. If your checkbook's in the red, then that's not such a good thing. But if your checkbook's in the black, that's a good thing. And so those emotional energies of faith and hope and constructive, compelling, creative energies, those are living in the black. And the destructive ones, which I think Trump exemplifies, of living in the red, is destructive and destroys and repelling. I mean, he wants to repel Muslims and Mexicans and is always name-calling and is tearing down. And that's such living in the red energies that he just propagates into society.
But the thing is that people, you're talking about this, but you're talking about a coup, which is a rebellion of kinds. But people, as I was saying before, unless they're riled up about something, they don't feel like making a coup. They don't feel like rebelling. And are the people, and do we have some impetus here that's going to tick some people off? For instance, health insurance. That ticks a lot of people, ticks me off. Can you name some of the things that might tick people off enough to where they take the democracy back?
Well, I think what ticks them off enough is that they know they don't count. They know that they've been abandoned, and that corporations and billionaires are making all the decisions. They know that, and I think if they want to be constructive and make a change, and they have to start realizing that it's not one person, one vote. Well, it's actually one person, one vote. But that their vote, and they think their vote doesn't count because of that. I want them to start thinking one vote equals 320 million people, an impact of 320 million, that their vote counts tremendously, because when you don't vote, that's a vote for apathy and letting the power structure, the people that are in charge continue to have their way. And when they start realizing that they can vote for 320 million and making those decisions is more empowering. I guess it's changing. It's an internal decision to let go of apathy and to be able to embrace your citizenship and start getting active and getting angry, start rebelling, but in a constructive, creative, living in the black way, meaning doing the things that I mentioned courageous voters do. They fact check everything. They have their representatives' telephone numbers in their smartphones, so when they do something they don't like, they just have one button to press and they can call their office or call the White House. There's something what legislators in the White House call is blowing up the phones. When enough people call on a certain issue, they call it blowing up the phones, and it does move them. And an example of that was net neutrality. The FCC chairman, actually the FCC is a captured department. Tom Wheeler was a former lobbyist for the telecommunications industry, and he's now chairman of the FCC, so it's sort of like the fox guarding the hen house. And he wanted to change the Internet to like cable television, where there are different plans and people can pay different rates. And so if you can afford more, you'd have the faster plan. But those who can't afford as much would have a slower Internet service. And so there was a huge fight about that. And people that learned about it blew up the phones, blew up the FCC phones and their legislative representatives, and that was stopped. He was unable to turn the Internet into a cable system. So that's the kind of power I want people to realize that they have. and not just think they're.
But are they going to be mad enough? Are they going to get ticked off enough and say, "Hey, we've had it. We've got to create a revolution in this country that's going to change"? Are the people really going to do it, or is it can't be something that's just minimal? It's got to be something that's really powerful. The revolution that you were talking about, Lech Walesa, it was a union thing on the Czech Republic. It was a union thing. The 4 unions against union, blah blah blah. It was the union thing that blew that country up and caused everything to blow apart. What is it in this country right now that it can make people angry enough? I mean, is it? I'm seeing here in Texas where only 40% of the people are actually covered by decent insurance. There are people dying on the streets, dying in their homes because they cannot afford medical care. Is this something like this big enough to create a rebellion? Are the people going to be willing to go out and say, stop it? And what will it take? I mean, we're not talking about guns in the face. Is it going to be are votes going to be big enough to change the country, or is it going to take something big enough to where we're walking into the government and saying, "Hey, shut up and get off the seat," or getting rid of a president like we did Nixon, You know what I'm saying? I'm talking about real change where we do have democracy. I honestly, to tell you the truth, I don't see it coming over a long period of time slowly. I think we're at a point right now. Because of our demographics. The demographics have changed, Jill. The demographics have changed. I heard it just yesterday. Somebody said, the whites in this country are no longer 50% even. We're less than 50%. That power that the old British white population used to have, and I'm not being racial here, I'm being honest, the fact that they had the power to make things happen. Now, where is that power? Is it in the hands of the Hispanics? Is it in the hands of who is it in the hands of?
Well, right today, the power is in the hands of our corporate execs and billionaires.
Well, that sounds like Republicans, but yet you're talking about the Democrats. You're on the Democrat side, but yet the Republican controlled corporations are, if they're running the thing, then it's not going to be a Democratic oriented society.
Well, and it's also half of the Democrats, too, because of their third way faction and because of Citizens United. It is going to be a long, titanic, committed process to recapture. I don't want to use the words revolution or revolt, but
we need to start using it. We need to start using it because the demographics have changed to such an extent that one way or the other, if one side does not rebel, the other side will. And if they don't, then the people outside the country are going to take over, Jill. We don't have time anymore to sit around on our asses and let the country be taken over by the people we don't want to take over the country. I'm telling you now, it's people like you who are saying it's going to take a long time, slow time to do it, that are wrong. We need to come with enough power with people who say, we want some change, we want it now, and it's going to happen. And if you're not going to do it, then get out of the office and put somebody in there. I'm afraid the Democrats don't have the power to do that. I'm afraid the Republicans have power in the wrong direction, but no matter what it is, we have actually been invaded, Jill. We've been invaded by people outside the country who now have the voting control. Do you realize that? If the people who have recently come into our country, they become citizens, they will change the way this country is. English will no longer be the language of our country. We're facing a situation here that is imminently very volatile, and but where will it go? I mean, that's what I'm trying to find, somebody who has the answer, a leader that people will follow, and somebody that can say, you know what, we're going to save America, we're going to change America, we're going to make America. As I'm seeing right now, we've lost the identity, the term America, the American dream, the American idealism. It's gone. I mean, what is it? I mean, I think it's a big question mark. Do you?
Well, I think it's both. I think we need that passion and voting now. Absolutely. I mean, this very election, everybody needs to get out and vote and start thinking about voting in a constructive and compelling way, and not using their vote as a weapon. Absolutely, we need to do that, and we need people to be angry. We need people to be constructively angry. We need people to get active, and we need to be ready for the long term, because there's a lot of power and money behind suppressing our activity. I don't particularly look that the answer is in a strong man. When you're looking for somebody who is going to be the answer, the one person that's the strong man, the authoritarian, that's going to, the father figure, that's going to make everything all right, I think we collectively have to all be strong men, strong people, and be able to make the change.
We need a leader. We need a leader. Lech Walesa.
We need a leader.
I disagree with you. I think that everyone is their leader within their own world, and that if everyone is concerned, they have a responsibility to actually voice their thoughts, their opinions. It is the power of the people. That is what the basis of this country is, the people, not one particular leader. They're actually working for us. Hey, listen, Jill Cody, I wish we could have you on longer because we're getting emails. One from Clinton says, how can I get to your website? It's AmericaAbandoned.com. It's AmericaAbandoned.com. Listen, Jill, I wish we could talk to you longer because, time is our enemy, and I'm afraid we're going to have to end this interview. But we want to thank you for joining us on the street.
Well, it has been my pleasure, and I love such a lively discussion with you and Ted. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you and your listeners.
Hey, Jill, thanks for bringing up the point that it really is going to take some impetus, that it's going to take some power, it's going to take some motivation. That's what I love to hear from you. Thanks for bringing that out.
You're welcome. Thank you.
This is CyberstationUSA.com's On the Street. Now we're going to switch it a little bit. There's concerns about our country, where we're going. Ted is a very emotional young man. I fear for him, but we're going to keep talking anyway. And next we're going to go on abuse. Is it something that we've all faced in our lives? Is it something that you know of that has affected lives? Is it affecting our country? And we're going to be talking to our next guest, who will be talking about what she feels from her experience might be a path. And our next guest, of course, as I stated, is a person who has had to deal with abuse in her life. It's Michelle Nagel. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, see you right here on the street.